I have a little message for the media, for Biden, for the Democrat Party. Little message for the Islamo-Nazis like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranian regime. Israel is not going to do less than we in the United States would do and have done for their own survival. They're not going to. This constant pressure by the West, particularly led by Biden, Blinken, and other sellouts and appeasers, is clearly anti-Semitic. No other nation on the face of the earth that's fighting for its survival has been asked to have a humanitarian ceasefire, quote unquote, as its military personnel is in harm's way conducting an operation, complex, so that the enemy can rearm, so that the enemy can regroup. To demand that the Israeli military do what our military would never do, the European military would never do, no military would ever do, is outrageous and unconscionable. Were we feeding territories conquered and controlled by the Taliban during the 21 years that we were there? Of course not. We should learn from our own mistakes rather than trying to project them onto other countries. We went into Iraq. We lost a lot of men, and a lot of them lost their arms, their eyes, parts of their heads, their legs, because we wouldn't fight to win. We refused to take on Iran. And so our soldiers suffered badly. And we sent a message to Iran that they can outlast us. And they can do whatever they want. And they can build whatever they want. That we're not going to stop them. Israel's not only fighting their enemies. Those enemies are our enemies. Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, the Muslim Brotherhood, Islamic Jihad. They've killed thousands of American citizens and thousands of American soldiers. And they are trying to fight a war as we do not anymore, and as apparently we will not anymore. They want to defeat Hamas. They want to obliterate Hamas. What is this humanitarian ceasefire stuff? Have you ever heard of that phrase in any other context than in the last 3.5 weeks? Did we have any talk about humanitarian ceasefires during the Civil War, during the Revolutionary War, during World War I, during World War II, during the Vietnam War, during the Korean War? Humanitarian ceasefire, it's a war. They're trying to defeat the enemy. Defeat the enemy. Enough of their people have died under presidents of both parties who've insisted on, quote unquote, the equivalent of humanitarian ceasefire. And Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and all the other yabba dabbas, they understand the Democrat Party / Western mentality, and they exploit it. And they exploit it. The Israelis, pray to God, are going to ignore Biden. They're going to ignore Blinken. Oh, publicly, they'll pat them on the head, thank them for everything. But behind the scenes, they must do what they must do. And if Hezbollah and Iran want to open a second and a third front, then Israel has the weapons to deal with that too. And they have the ultimate weapon. We used the ultimate weapon twice. Those bombs were built for Germany. But it turned out it was Japan that wouldn't surrender. And American lives, red-blooded American lives, we had lost enough lives. World War II. Hundreds of thousands of lives. And Japan wouldn't surrender. Then we fought at Okinawa. And people don't know, on that little island, south of Japan, Okinawa, our Marines suffered the greatest casualties in any battle in American history. The Marines did. Any of their battles in our history, that was the most costly. Not Iwo Jima, not Guam, not the Solomon Islands, Okinawa. And enough was enough. All throughout World War II, civilians were targeted. They were targeted by the Axis powers. They were targeted by the Alliance. As well as manufacturing sites and military sites, of course. But if you don't take the heart out of the enemy doesn't die. Harry Truman, after he dropped the first atomic bomb, they weren't sure it would work. They were thrilled when it did. They only had another one. The Emperor of Japan, much like a religious figure, he offered a partial surrender with conditions. Truman said no, unconditional surrender, and they wouldn't do it. 2 or 3 days later, they dropped the second bomb. They had none left. They prayed to God it would work. And it did. And Japan surrendered unconditionally. Mark, you're such a warmonger. Isn't that interesting? History makes you a warmonger. Discussing history makes you a warmonger. But I don't judge my character. I don't judge my morality. I don't judge myself based on what reprobates, malcontents, and miscreants have to say about me or anybody else. The swine are in the mud, right where they belong, with Hamas, the Hamas Nazis. And they have more in common with the Hamas Nazis than with people fighting for their liberty. Civilized people who believe in humanity and life. A humanitarian ceasefire? That's the phrase now. Humanitarian to whom? The Israelis? The Israeli soldiers? Those are citizen soldiers. Israel is mostly citizen soldiers. Humanitarian ceasefire for whom? Oh, the Palestinians. Oh, the Egyptians won't let them out. The Egyptians won't take any. The Jordanians, and I can go through the other 22 Arab countries, they won't take them. But a humanitarian ceasefire, where we know the Hamas Nazis steal the food, steal the medicine, steal the fuel. They know it. But they want to do it anyway. Why? Because those aren't, honestly, American lives in Gaza, so Biden says it. Well, some of them are Americans, some of them are dual citizens. Those aren't French lives. Those aren't British lives who are fighting. Those are the Israelis, the Jews. So sure, we should have a humanitarian ceasefire. You should never use the word humanitarian in the same sentence as Hamas. Not in the same sentence. And Joe Biden. Let me be clear. Let me be clear. So the Hamas Nazi-loving propagandists in the media and their little websites, the George Soroses and the Charles Koch crowd, let me be as clear as I know how. And I've already said it, but let me say it again. Joe Biden has blood on his hands. So does Blinken. So does Sullivan. They all do. So does Malley. that humanitarian ceasefire. I guess that goes along with the humanitarian rearming of the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran that slaughters its own people, its own little girls. Humanitarian ceasefire. I guess that goes along with the humanitarian aid to the Palestinians that use it for terrorism. Humanitarian ceasefire. In other words, Joe Biden is pushing appeasement in stages. I was thinking about this. Appeasement in stages is appeasement. Appeasement in stages is appeasement. The Israelis would do well to pat Joe on the head, to go through these 7.5-hour Ivy League type meetings with Blinken and do what the hell they need to do regardless.